You do those.
No, it wasn't the best week, mate. We'll see. I like to line.
Our train wasn't so.
And answer the phone.
Okay.
Looking resplendent today, Councillor Collins.
You know when you want to.
It's nice colour, Councillor Collins.
Thank you.
California.
Don't worry.
And your skirt as well, you notice?
Thank you.
Not a skirt, Ross. A skirt.
Just teasing, just teasing.
Speaking the type of skirt. See the influence we've had on each other?
You see? Walking straight down the middle line.
Type of kilt.
Yeah, type of kilt.
Kilt with a K.
At least mine's a Santa suit.
Right. Welcome everyone. Welcome Papakura Local Board, and welcome to the public that's here. We will open the meeting. Apologies, we have Member Honeck for absence and Councillor Holz for lateness on council business. I'll move that. Seconded by Councillor Collins. All those in favour?
Aye.
Any declarations of interest? Should be none. Confirmation of the minutes. If we could have a mover, please. Councillor Simpson, seconded by Councillor Cooper. All those in favour?
Aye.
Do I have to do that twice? No. Good. There are no petitions, but there is public input today from the Springs Speedway Residents Association, represented by Simon Dew and Nairi Harnett. So welcome, please come out, Hartnett, sorry. Please, welcome.
We got a nice one.
You have 5 minutes. Yeah. You have 5 minutes, and then there'll be questions after that. So.
Well, thank you for allowing us to appear today. I'm Simon Dew, and I represent the SSRA, the Springs Stadium Residents Association. For over 20 years, members of the Springs Speedway Residents Association have fought to make the Speedway at Western Springs comply with the law. We've never, as some people have attested, ever demanded the removal of Speedway, but have simply and consistently asked for it to comply with the law in exactly the same way as every other person and entity in the community is required to do. This has never happened. In 2005, Justice Peter Salmond, commissioned by Auckland City Council, wrote a BPO report, Best Practical Options report, detailing the minimum requirements for the continuation of Speedway at Western Springs. To this date, not one solitary recommendation of this report has been implemented despite the requirements of the RMA to recognise the BPO. Instead, the Council and Springs Promotion seem to frustrate the process by transforming the interim agreement, and I highlight the word interim, that was reached between the Springs Residents Association and the Springs Promotions and the Council in mediation the previous year in order to facilitate the completion of the Speedway season, while the BPO report was commissioned, into a permanent solution. So they just kept the interim agreement in place. At all times, the residents have acted in good faith, only to be treated pretty much as naive and unimportant. None of us, for instance, were contacted for an opinion over the implementation of the interim agreement into the unitary plan. Now that we hear our opposition to Western Springs Speedway has faded and that there is no opposition to the continuation of racing at the Speedway, this is patently not true. Our members have continued to complain and have emailed the entire council expressing our concerns. We did get 2 replies. If we have been a bit quieter over the last few months, it was simply that we heard that a solution had finally been reached and that Springs Speedway was moving to Collindale Park. Make no mistake, our outrage at the continuous flouting of the law at Western Springs is not diminished, and as the intensity of the occupation of the area continues to increase, it will be an even greater injustice to continue making industrial levels of noise in this entirely residential neighbourhood. Thank you. I'll hand you over to you, Nairi.
Kia ora. I'm just really wanting to say that my whānau and I have lived on Old Mill Road and have been Grayland residents now for nearly 40 years. I actually threw out my folder when I heard that yes, Speedway was moving. So I've actually rather quickly had to go through and gather together what I could find. One of the things that I did find was a letter from De Cupboard when he was mayor, and in that he said that that officers prepare, it was basically dated the 15th of December 2006, and in it I quote, that office going forward, Council passed the following resolution 26 October 2006, that officers prepare and lodge a resource consent application to vary the terms of the concept plan for Speedway events at Western Springs on the basis of the recommendations made in the Honourable Peter Salmon QC's report on Speedway at Western Springs Stadium. I just feel like there was a lot of work undertaken then. I would like to think that all the councillors that are having a vote on what's happening down at Speedway at least read that report, because that to me is the beginning and the end of it. So, and I also wanted to come and support Simon when I can hear it bandied about that there is now no opposition from the neighbours. That is not the case. We have remained quiet thinking, okay, it's going, and it never has. So that's why I'm here for. And I would hate to think that it was coming on under new plans, because there was a time that we had racing every weekend of summertime. So there was just not one opportunity that we could gather around the barbecue in the backyard like everybody else and actually enjoy a summer evening. We used to have like 3 days racing over the Christmas period. Everyone else is having a break and enjoying their holiday, and we couldn't get that. So I can just feel like this is an escalation and we're no further ahead. I've met many councillors over the years, so everyone's changed. I've had dealings with Banks. I've had dealings with Bruce Hucker. You know, I've just had spoken at length with lots of them, giving lots of assurances. I see that nobody that I've spoken to is now here. So I just want to say, yes, we're opposed to it staying there. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed.
Councillor Watson.
Oh, thanks.
Oh, yes.
The grass.
Sorry, yeah.
Questions.
So
I'll
thank
be-
you
Yeah, sorry,
very much.
that's right.
Yeah, no, Springs Promotion Limited, the entity the council is doing business with, essentially,
Yeah.
the chief players in that, they put out this glossy brochure and gave it to all the councillors, and in it they said, and I'll quote, noise. The Auckland Council report that the sport of Speedway has been compliant for a number of years. These reports can be viewed online, and that was around about 2016. Then they have quoted a gentleman who I won't name, but who's the Principal Specialist Environmental Health at Auckland Council. I'm happy to meet you. For your information, under the new unitary plan rules, the events to date have been complying comfortably with an average of about 85 decibels. The new limit is 89 decibels. Is Springs Promotion telling the truth?
I don't believe they are. No, I think that's, well, one thing is that the 89 decibels was never an agreed limit. It was an interim agreement that allowed them to go to 90, while the BPO was formed from Justice Salmon. Justice Salmon doesn't mention anything about 89 decibels, so where that came from, I don't know.
So how have you found?
Also, I haven't found any sign of the Speedway being monitored for the last few years. It was supposed to be monitored and posted online.
Well,
it's not there now. You go and have a look and see if you can find it.
Okay. So how have you found your dealings with Springs Promotion then in terms of any issues you've had?
Well, we've had hundreds of dealings with Springs Promotions over the years, and they've not been terribly easy to go. As you see, they can produce a large glossy report, and they usually have large glossy lawyers to go with it, and because they've got a large glossy budget, whereas we are just the residents of the neighbourhood, and consequently not. It's a David and Goliath battle.
Interesting.
How would
Councillor
we know?
Filipaina.
How would we know whether they comply with the noise levels? Who's monitoring that?
Well,
Where can we find it?
Well, they have said
I've never
councils
seen
monitor.
that brochure.
Yeah.
So I've never been able
Interestingly enough, they didn't provide it to us. That's a bit late for that now, isn't it?
I will get that.
I'm sure he'll
But
give you a
never
copy
seen
of the
it.
brochure. Councillor Filipaina.
Yeah, look, can just let me know how many residents do you represent
around Western Springs?
Our numbers have changed over the years. I'm not the person who does anything to do with that. I'm just a representative who's chosen because I have a bit of a mouth, but I'm not. You'd have to talk to John Watson or someone like that to find out what our specific numbers are. But we are. I mean, I've been a resident for over 30 years, so I don't.
Yeah, we're not referring to Councillor Watson, but
No, different John
Checking.
different John Watson.
They
yeah.
say I've got a split personality, so I'm
Would the
just...
real John Watson please stand?
the devil's in the detail.
An undercover operative.
Okay, so look, and just a second question. Now, recently there was a decision made around this chamber that that the move of the Speedway to Collindale Park, that was deferred as a result of a stadia strategy that looks at all the stadia around Auckland. So that's the reason why they're currently at the moment there. So what were your thoughts when you heard that it had been deferred from going to Collindale Park would have solved your problems? What were your thoughts?
We
then?
were utterly gutted because
Yeah.
we were told that it was a done deal, and
Oh.
we saw it in the newspaper, announced in the Herald that it was
Oh.
going and that cricket was coming in, and we like the sound of willow on leather a lot better than we like the sound of V8 engines racing on methanol.
Okay, so but you read it in the Herald, so it was reported.
It was, yes,
From the
yeah.
Herald.
It was a fait accompli as far as we were concerned.
Okay, thank you. You should have a look at the tape when that decision was made.
Councillor Lee.
Thank you. Good morning to you both. I met with Joe Cassiopoli of your organisation yesterday.
Sure.
And he outlined a long history of the problems you folk have had with getting enforcement. I guess I'm the new Bruce Hucker. I've taken over
Right.
this role. I understand there was an enforcement order from Judge Peter Salmond stipulating conditions.
It was a BPO. What happened was we went to the Environment Court where we managed to stop the Speedway for the season. I think it was 2004. You can't quote me on the dates because it's all a long time in the past. We went into mediation. The mediation agreed that we would allow them to have an interim period where they could continue racing for 12 races a year. But that the council would commission a BPO from a senior environmental jurist who was Justice Peter Salmond, and then that would be implemented into the the Resource Management Act and by way of the district plan. I think my language might be wrong, but it was going to become part of the law of Auckland. And what happened was we got the BPO. It was a fairly comprehensive document. It's still available online. You can read it from Scoop's website if you just Google Justice Salmond's Western Springs report. And it's basically laid out a whole lot of mitigating ways of making the Speedway tenable. And as I say, not a single solitary one of them has ever been adopted by anyone, and the interim agreement has been perverted into being a permanent solution.
So, in other words, what you were telling us is that the council has been unable or unwilling to enforce the rules. Is that the...
As far as we're concerned, yes. Yeah. The council has not... Well, I mean, we get told all sorts of things, but we continue to expect that the council will operate according to the Resource Management Act and implement the best practical options report.
Okay. Be assured, whatever happens to Speedway, whether it stays in Western Springs or whatever, I'll be looking to make sure that the council starts doing its job and enforcing those rules. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Walker.
Sure. Hi. So
Hi.
I'm a Walker, not a Watson.
Right.
Is your concern around noise generally, irrespective of whether it's Speedway?
Yeah, I think there's certain levels of noise that are acceptable and certain levels that aren't. There is one understands that it's an event centre, and that that occasionally there are functions there that make a lot of noise. We get a lot of noise from things like the food festival and Pacifica and things like that. but it's the every Saturday night of the Speedway, and it's the unremitting droning noise that drives us completely nuts, and the levels of it. It's way louder than anything else that goes on there.
So how does that compare with noises from concerts, especially rock concerts and the like, that often
Well, they barely
have
ever
a longer
have any.
duration?
They barely ever have any now. I mean, there's been there was City Beats, I think, which was pretty loud, but it's a one-off thing. You know, we can cope with one-off things. It's the week in, week out, every Sunday. So you can't plan a party in my garden, you know, because it's going to be drowned out by 1,000 enraged mosquitoes.
So if there were a lot of concerts at Western Springs and making a loud noise, you'd be equally
Well, we
disturbed
would
about
expect that the council would apply the law, which they do apparently. I think if the concerts go 1 decibel over the limit, they get a massive fine. They pay a huge bond to have a concert at Western Springs, and they're managed very effectively. Whereas Speedway hasn't paid a fine ever, to my knowledge.
Wow.
Have they?
Well, maybe that's because they're within the sound limit. I'm not
No,
sure.
no, they're not. I mean, they put as part of the interim agreement, they put a noise monitoring tower in there, which they imported from Sweden at some enormous sum of money, which was surprisingly damaged beyond repair within a week. And so the noise monitoring has never been reliably performed. Regularly it says, oh, it's too windy to take a measurement. And we know that the noise is wind dependent, and if you're downwind from it, you're going to cop it. Read the Justice Salmon report. He deals very effectively with all those arguments about the noise, and discusses the whole process of the concerts as well. He's a senior environmental jurist. I would hate to try and impose my opinion over the top of his.
Councillor Darby.
Look, thank you, both Simon and Nairi. I want to get to the crux of this, because this is not about noise, and it's not about the current unitary plan and the planning provisions. It's about a decision of the court and your community expectation that an activity, Speedway, would be vacating the Springs. And it's not
Or
about
complying with the law.
Yeah, and your correspondence from John Watson, the chair or the president of your association, is consistent with that. And I just want to get to the nub of it. You're here because you heard in recent weeks the suggestion here that the residents had not been in contact and were not strongly advocating. And I'm hearing that in some ways you were in abeyance because there was an expectation.
Yeah, we heard it in the paper. We
the
read it in the
council-
Herald.
The council would follow through. And is that the nub of it?
Yeah, we thought it was a done deal.
And that's what you would like the council to be consistent with?
Yeah, we were satisfied with the solution. I think it makes perfect sense to move Speedway to a genuine motor. I'm nothing against motorsport. I'm an avid motorcycle fan myself, but I just think that it should be complying with the law. And if you can take it out to Collindale Park, where it's right out by the airport, where you can make as much noise as you like and enjoy the sport all year round, why would you not do that?
Okay, I've got it. Thanks.
Councillor Hulse.
Thank you. Councillor Darby started my question because I am a little bit confused by some of the discussion. So I just want to clarify 2 points. Have you been in touch with the local board? Because it's my understanding, and in presentations that we've had from the local board, that they're quite clear that the residents are concerned about Speedway and have consistently raised your worries about the level of noise.
I can't speak for any members of the group. I personally haven't been in touch with the board for a long time. I mean, I did attend meetings with them in the beginning in the process, but no, I personally haven't. But it may well have been other members of our group have.
Sure.
Sorry, can I just say, I spoke to Penny Sefa-Weaver, this was years ago when she was a councillor, and when I actually wrote to her because it was just too much. It was just, I could see it was ramping up. And she said that she checked and there had been no complaints to council about it. Now, I don't know where the box that the complaints go to, but I couldn't believe that because I personally had been complaining on a fairly regular basis at after 10:30 on a Sunday night. after 11, you know, I think of late they're complying more with the sound, but I can't believe that anyone can say there have been no complaints about it.
We discovered, in fact, at the meeting at Pasadena School when we first started this whole process that we were making complaints to the noise control, and they were instructed to tear them up at the end of the night, because if they were in to do with Western Springs, there was no point in keeping them.
So I think, Mr Chair, we've got a separate issue around our complaints, because I know statements were made at the meeting where the decision was made by half of us plus one to defer. For the other half of us, we were very happy for the whole process to proceed exactly as you had expected it to. But I do think we need to follow up you know, the statements that were made that there had been no complaints and that the councillors had never seen a complaint. I think we do need to find out where they go to. And
I think we need to follow up on the lack of enforcement as well. That's shocking.
Thank you, Councillor Lee.
Yeah, but the point is, it is the local elected members who need to be doing that. I stopped the other night, there was a Speedway was on, and I stopped and drove up the hill and had a listen myself. So it certainly is quite
imposing.
Clear what the issues are. Thank you.
Councillor Cooper.
Mr Chair, I just wanted to say, as the Chair of the Regulatory Committee, that I think rather than you know, our own council, you know, we need to actually find out, I'll get a memo around this in terms of what the monitoring has been, so we can get something in front of us to know what we need to do. But I mean, as
just
Councillor,
move it. Forget about the monitoring. Just move the thing out to Collindale Park.
What I was just saying, and as Councillor Darby said, you know, really the issue is about moving it.
The issue is about moving it.
And would you actually say, I mean, we've known about this for years, it's been going on forever, and I don't for 1 minute believe you're a bunch of complainers about nothing.
Right.
Because, you know, you love living where you live, but you want to have a quality of life. Do you think there's ever a chance that having Speedway there could actually comply really, in reality? Because of the nature of what it is?
Well, you know, I'm a mechanic by preference, a real estate agent in life, but and I know I can make an engine as quiet as I like. But it's about competitiveness. They, you know, if they race Rolls Royces around that track, in fact, you know, they claim they've been there since 905, but of course in 905 they were racing 500cc motorcycles around there. That wouldn't have made nearly the noise that the V8 turbocharged methanol burning monsters that they run around there now make. It's not the same vehicles, and it's not the same sport. So if they race Rolls-Royce Silver Ghosts around there, I'm sure we'd all be completely happy. But they don't. They race mini cars and midgets and massively powerful things with minimal muffling, and love the noise. They love the noise. That's the whole thing. The thing is about the noise. You look at the adverts on the TV, it's about the noise. They love it, and they should love it at Collindale Park.
Cool. Thank you.
Sorry, can I just sort of say that, you know, you're actually talking about motor racing in what is a natural amphitheatre sound shell. So I have been in Lloyd Avenue in Mount Albert, out on their deck having dinner and hearing this racket, and I went, oh, I wouldn't have thought you could hear the motorway from here. And they said, no, that's Speedway. So I just think that people have sort of got used to it. And I also feel that if it stays, there will be an uphill battle, because they are constantly pushing the envelope. We agree 12 meets, 2 rain-out days, and then all of a sudden there's a rain-out day for every meet that's there. Right. What that means is, like, when I'm having a sort of a family occasion, I'll go and check on my fridge where I've got when the meets are. Oh no, we can't have it then, it's race night, so let's have it then. But now you can't even guarantee that, because if it's raining that night, then they have it on the night that you've planned an occasion. So I just feel like if we let them go, it's going to be somebody having to watch the whole time. And I think that the people sitting here are the ones that should be watching, not us. You know, we've got Old Mill Road, which is now a bit of a racetrack, and then we've got the one down the back. And now we're not allowed to have parking on our street because of the bike lane. We are just being squeezed, and yet it's supposed to be those little cottages, those bungalows, are historic, you know, and we just feel like they're treated with utter contempt.
Councillor Bartley.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you. Thank you for your presentation. My family live on Kiwi Road. They've been living there since, I think, the 50s, 60s. Whenever family come from Samoa, we stay there, and we branch out to the rest of Auckland. They don't have a problem with the speedway. So, because, you know, so their thoughts are, well, you move into the area and you know there's a speedway there. So what's your response to people who say that to you? Well, you knew there was a speedway there when you moved in. Yeah.
Well, you know, anyone's welcome to like it. I would ask if your parents would miss it so much that they'd leave Kiwi Road if it was gone, rather than you know, enjoying it while it's there. I knew Speedway was there, but I presumed that it would be complying with the law, the way I'm required to comply with the law. I had a party for my daughter's 21st birthday, and noise control came round and closed it down, very rightly so, because we were making a horrible noise. So I'm not immune to making too much noise, but if Speedway makes a horrible noise, nobody closes them down. So that's an essential difference that I find untenable, not the fact that occasionally people make noise.
Well, I would just like to quote from Brian Rudman from the Herald, because I think that, you know, we can answer that, and that's what I say to people. Forget the blather about 75 years of history. If we got stuck in that rut, they'd still be burning rubbish down at Victoria Park. You know, I mean, why not leave the petrol tanks down on the waterfront, because they've always been there, or the abattoir, and we'd be still drinking the water out of Western Springs. I don't think that cuts it. Communities change, you know, and what's acceptable. We're getting very, very busy in the city, and I feel that, you know, we put up with stuff because we live in the city, but a racetrack in the central city?
And don't forget, there are 10,000 houses going into the old Unitec site, so the pressure on the neighbourhood is going to increase in a huge way. There's going to be a vast number of more residential people living in the area. So it's not the same suburb as it has been.
No.
Right. Very good. Okay. Well, I'll move the vote of thanks, and we have a seconder from Councillor Hills. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. And thank you, Nairi, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for having us.
Appreciate it.
Thanks very much. Excuse me, Mr. Chair, just a question for you. I'm always happy to hear any different perspective on any given issue. There's no item on Speedway to do with the agenda. I'm assuming, therefore, people with other perspectives, of which I know there's many, will also now be accorded the same courtesy that our guests were today in forthcoming meetings.
Oh, if it's relevant, yeah. If it's relevant to
Well,
something that's active at the moment.
Yeah, okay, so we'll pass that around.
Right, okay.
So just on that, Chair, you're only acting consistent with the standing orders, are you not?
Yep, yeah.
So,
I've got a few other
All right, we're going to now move to local board input, and we have Brent and the team from Papakura, and Brent will introduce everyone. Felicity, Bill and Michael. Welcome. Welcome, Brent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Your Worship. Councillors, thank you for the opportunity for allowing us to put our case for preserving the car parks in Papakura. I have with me this morning, on my right is the Deputy Chair, Felicity Ava'a, and local board member Bill McEntee, and on my left I have local board member Michael Turner. We have apologies from the Honourable George Hawkins, who's under his doctor's orders not to stand on his legs at the moment. So he's... and also, we have with us the chair of the Business Association, Paula Schultz, sitting behind me, and also a business owner in O'Shanassy Street, Shremon Long, and her mother, Von King. So they're here in support of our position, noting that the effect on businesses around Papakura. I'll say it up front, we want the sale to stop, and that's the sale of 26 to 32 O'Shannessy Street and 36 Coles Crescent in Papakura. And we will outline 3 main areas as to why we feel that way, and that will include the understanding of the impact and outcomes of the Ollie, which is Papakura's multi-storey park and ride, the lack of adequate parking around Papakura, and also a new player in the whole process, and that is the government strategy around transport and the transport corridor between Papakura and Hamilton. So first of all, I'll pick up on the Ollie. This we have just learnt is looks like it's not going to proceed with the multi-storey car park as we have been promised for a number of years now. This is now being scaled back to an on-grade type car park. In other words, painting a few extra lines on the ground and adding a few extra car parks, nowhere near the number that is required, because the parking around the railway station, which also impacts on the town centre, is now extreme. It's under extreme pressure, and we do not have sufficient parking around Papakura to cater for all of the traffic and the parking requirements of the commuters and the businesses around Papakura. The park and ride changes, there have been several changes over the years, starting off with the park and ride on the eastern side on railway land, Kiwi Rail land. That then transferred across to council-owned land on the western side, and that is where, up until very recently, with the multi-storey car park, which we were assured by the Auckland Transport Board when we presented to them earlier this year that Ollie was secure and was funded with the support of NZTA funding. So they were confident that it was going to take place. The plans are now up in the air, and we are absolutely devastated by that fact, and understanding that the impact overall, and I'll get Felicity to talk about the impact on the town centre and the lack of parking in a moment, but the parking in the south originally started around the railway station. They've now moved north, and parking in the north, which is where these 2 pieces of car park are located, they are now at full capacity in the north as well. So there is insufficient transport parking, public transport parking around Papakura and the railway station, but particularly around Papakura itself. Felicity.
Thank you, Brent. As I said, I'm Felicity. I've lived in Papakura for 50 odd years. I love Papakura, passionate about it. I'd love to see some of you councillors come out and see our beautiful town and just see the issues that have now arisen in our town centre. I've brought all my 4 children up there. I've worked, ate, lived, slept in Papakura, driven my car all over Papakura. And I can honestly say we've never had such an issue of parking now in Papakura. It is really quite desperate. I know as Brent has been talking, I can see some of you not quite understanding what he's talking about, because some of you may not have visited Papakura and understand the situation, but we're one of these good old-fashioned towns that have got a main street, which is the Great South Road, and people go there to shop and enjoy it, and we have a beautiful train station that now has reached its capacity. And what's happening is that all the streets surrounding our little little town are now full of people parking there because they want to use the facility of the train, and they are blocking our streets for parking, and this is a major problem. Aside from the Ollie, which we hoped was going to fix this problem, we now have to look at the amazing growth that we're anticipating in Papakura. The south is taking off, guys. It's not all about central Auckland or North Auckland or south. The south is going to be the gateway to Auckland, and we want to protect it. We want to encourage Papakura as a metropolitan centre, and we need these car parks, the Coles Crescent car park and O'Shanassy Street car park, to supply the parking to encourage our people to shop, eat, meet, greet in Papakura. Now, we are concerned that we need a delay on this decision because we have a parking survey that needs to be completed. It was being advised that this parking study will be completed in March 2019 and reported back to the board in April, May 2019. And we're really concerned that this parking strategy will show you the need for car parks in Papakura. We've got a huge rental property growth that's going on, and there's, of course, they're going to have parking in the streets. And we can't move Papakura forward until we can assure people that you can, of course, park your cars somewhere. I'm a great walker. I walk everywhere. And of course, I know that people will say, well, why can't you walk into town? Some of our people come from all around our district. We're on the verge of the country there. Hunua, Karaka. We want people to come. We've got a massive development going out the back there over Drury, as you're aware. And we're hoping that people will be encouraged to come to Papakura as well. What we want to do is we want to work with the council. We want to work with Panuku. And we want to work with the development that's going to take place there. But we want assurance that we are going to be involved in this development plan and that we can have a resolution that if these properties are to be sold in future, that they're going to be assured that they will supply car parks and we can have a say in the development that's going to take place. We do not want it to be a cast off for social housing. We want upfront, modern, exciting developments with car parks available for our people. And so we want assurance that we can work with you and that we can have great development plans that include us as a local board, and we can say this is where we want Papakura to go. So please, please, we want you to consider us, either delay this motion or consider a resolution that will include us in the development plan and will include car parks. Thank you.
Just to add a thought to the need to keep the car parking, there's a growing fleet of electric vehicles. This should be an ideal location for electric vehicle charging in these two car parks. So we're basically cutting off our nose to spite our face if these car parks are sold and there is nowhere else for them to be used around the town. It's also an ideal place, and we suggested to Auckland Council, Auckland Transport, that this would be a good bus layover. But the size of the buses that we have at the moment are too large. They're all running around with 2 or 3 passengers in them. The smaller vehicles, these two car parks would be perfect for the layover of the buses instead of all around the streets as we currently have them. There is a proposal to have a bus depot interchange at the railway station, which has affected the proposal for the park and ride up until this point as well, and that's delayed the single business case study, which was promised to us this time last year. But an addition of the idea of parking for buses and an interchange, along with the potential for having accommodation and apartments above the park and ride, is also being considered by Panuku as part of the park and ride. But coming back to the O'Shanassy Street and what's known as the Davis car park in Papakura, which is the one at 36 Coles Crescent, these are ideal for service vehicles for public transport. Now, I just want to raise the point
Brenda, I've given you quite a lot of extra time.
Just one more point, which is the government's strategy for the corridor. 2 meetings with Minister Twyford and his advisors, and I can tell you they all believe that Papakura is the main hub for this whole corridor, and it is integral. It is integral to their plans, and extremely important that it has the ability to manage the parking around Papakura. I'd just like to, with your indulgence, Mr. Chair, ask if there's any further comment from our other two board members, please.
Yes, I have, and I'll be very brief. I'm probably the one that's got a bob each way in this. In the October meeting of the Papakura Local Board, I voted to support Panuka with the development of the Davis car park, but I did oppose the other sale in O'Shanassy Street based on the fact that we were told by Panuku that there were some developer looking at it with the idea of putting social housing in there, being as we've got 1,900 already in Papakura, and I do not want to see that happen in the main shopping centre of Papakura. However, at that stage when I made that decision to vote against my fellow board members, I was also aware that we had a promise from Auckland Transport to do what you've just heard my learned colleagues discuss here, that we had a two-storey car park beside the railway. Now, they have now announced to us that it's probably not going to happen, and I think sometimes a few facts are really good to know. Yesterday morning at the car park, I can tell you that every car park was full. There were 406 cars relating to the railway station there, parking in and around the residential area immediately around there. There are another 114. This is outside of the 368 car parks. I'm talking of a total of 888 cars were there parked yesterday on the train in Papakura. At 7 o'clock this morning, I could not get in either car park, nor could I get within cooey of the railway station. I had to park a distance away. So I think what I'm really saying is, although I believe that we have to move ahead with Panuka, being as a metropolitan centre, and if we don't, we're biting our own nose off in fact. But I do also think that if Auckland Transport have now back turned and said they're not going to support us, well then I'm afraid I have to support my colleagues here and say we cannot have these two sites sold at this stage until we have some resolution from Auckland Transport, and I hope that somewhere along the way there's someone in this room who is conveying this message to them. 888 cars parked around Papakura yesterday, many of them a distance away in the residential area. It's not good enough. We've had these promises now for 4 years, and we've acted on those. Our residents know about them. It's been announced. It was in the Courier. It's a very sad day for our town that they've made that decision, and yes, we do need to retain these car parks in the interim anyway. Thank you.
I just got to say I concur with my colleagues here. We need to get the right story from Auckland Transport. There's been conflicting stories said, and while we've got a major car parking survey going on, we have to delay the sale of these two properties until that survey comes out and we get the right information. So that's, yeah, we just need the right stories. Thank you.
Councillor Sayers.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much for your presentation. I think made it pretty clear what you're after. But my question just related, I don't know if you know the answer to this, but and I don't want to make an assumption, and that's with all those cars that are coming in, and we've just heard that figure there of over 800, and where are they coming from? You know, what wards, what areas of Auckland are they travelling from to get there?
I can tell you they're coming as far south as Hamilton, and we get that information from the security guards that look after those two car parks around the station. Hamilton, Pokeno, Huntly, Pukekohe, all around the south. They're coming from Beachlands, Maraetai, you name it. They're coming through to us to join the train.
And would it be fair, therefore, to assume that it's not local people, it is those, the
no, it's
majority
definitely
are
local
from outside.
There's there's local people using it as well. Oh yes,
Absolutely.
there's a lot. From Karaka and that way, and round Papakura. The bus service is, although it's improved, it certainly hasn't catered for the needs of the the bulk of Papakura.
Right, okay.
And they'd be coming through from Takanini as well. From a lot of people going through Papakura to take the train from there too.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Wayne Walker.
Sure. Got a couple of questions for you. The first one just goes to the parking study that I understand is underway, and it's AT that's doing that, is it?
Yes.
Okay. Given the circumstance that we're seeing in a lot of parts of Auckland where streets, maybe a street like O'Shanassy Street and other streets, have cycle lanes, and I note that these streets in this vicinity all have on-street parking. What's the possible impact of that on the loss of parks in Papakura? And I mean, I don't know whether AT has put that up yet, but that appears to be what's happening all around Auckland.
They haven't put that up for O'Shanassy Street yet, but if they did, it would devastate the businesses in there, and our business owner in Papakura and O'Shanassy Street will tell you that, and so will the chair of the business association as well. It would devastate the town centre's business.
And that certainly happened in other parts of Auckland where AT has done that. The other question I've got just goes to the requirements for businesses in the area, and I'm assuming you've got a number of smaller retail businesses, and what is the requirement around parking, especially short stay parking, as far as those businesses are concerned, and has there been any study done of that?
An official study, perhaps not, but about 4 weeks ago, I went out and photographed the O'Shanassy Street car park. It was fully occupied except for 2 spaces. One was a mobility space. The other one, I had to wait for the car to pull out and drive away. I then took the photograph and the car park was full moments later. 2 days ago, I went, Friday. Friday, I went back and took more photographs, exactly the same situation, and the whole of O'Shanassy Street is fully occupied with cars parked in it.
And the last question, just through you, Mr. Chair, I mean, you mentioned I think it was 888 parks and so on. Is it likely that a substantial number of those parks are for people that are parking and then catching the train? That's your contention?
Most of them. 99% of them, probably.
Okay.
Yeah.
And has there been any study done of that on the part of Auckland Transport?
Well, I'm hoping that is part of their study that's happening at the moment, so as they can actually assess the impact it's having on Papakura.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Casey.
Well, thanks, Mr. Chairman. I'll ask my question through you. I was going to ask the presenters with regard to our paragraph 13, which was a workshop back in May, where they discussed a proposal for some social housing and some housing for older people, and they decided that it didn't support further social housing. But I've since heard from the presenters this morning, and I want to ask them about what I think you're saying. And Felicity, you said, I don't want cast-off social housing. And Malcolm, you said, I don't want that happening in the main shopping centre. And it seemed to me there was a sense of Kiwi Build or social housing being less than optimal, that it wouldn't follow good design principles and it wouldn't be good. And from what I've seen, that's not the case. So it's through you, could they please explain what I took to be a pejorative sense of social housing and Kiwi Build?
We're certainly not opposed to social housing and Kiwi Build in Papakura, the wider Papakura. Papakura and Takanini was the first Kiwi Build house to be handed over. We're very supportive of that. But to place social housing in the main hub of Papakura is going to limit what we can achieve in the form of a metropolitan centre, and that is integral because it is set out in the Auckland Plan that Papakura is recognised to be a metropolitan centre, and we are looking to achieve that, and we've had a town planner put together a plan for us to show how Papakura can look. And unfortunately, if you start putting in social housing and low-rise houses into some of these spaces, it locks it down for 30 to 50 years before anything else can happen.
That's all, Councillor Casey?
Yep.
Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you. I'd like to put my question to Bill. Good to see you here, Bill. Felicity mentioned the fact that with Papakura, that it's a bit of a shopping mecca for surrounding areas, including Karaka. And I recall you coming and making an impassioned presentation as the chair of the local board a few years back now, talking about the difficulty you were experiencing in generating that level of bringing people back that could opt to go to Pukekohe, or they could shop in Papakura. And so just whether there's been a change since then, whether Papakura is seeing some resurgence where people are coming back. And I want to ask you that in the context of the recommendations. You know, I want to know what we are doing is going to fundamentally support the growth of Papakura going into the future. And on a personal note, last week I was at the Cleveland East Medical Centre with my husband. As you know, he's in a wheelchair, and I had to go to O'Shaughnessy Street to pick something up for him. And after an hour of circling, because when you do a transfer using a walker into a wheelchair, it is extremely difficult. After an hour, we had to give up and we had to drive home because we were unable to park. So I would like you to just reflect on whether there's been a change since 2012 when you were addressing us on what was happening in terms of the Papakura business level of prosperity and what we're now seeing.
Yes, well said. It has changed.
I came back via the Nina Busing kindergarten,
Busing.
Which you may recall attending with me. Yes.
I did as well.
Getting back from Nina Busing, yeah, there has been a change, and it's a gradual change, and it certainly from 2012 when I made that plea to now is a different. It's a different town, or it's starting to become a different town. We're getting people who are doing new buildings, like the old medical centres is going to be revamped. There's apartments being made in the main street, and it's starting to just make that transition that I was pleading for in 2012. So yes, it is a different beast, and we cannot do without, as you say, car parks. So the car parking is just, it's hard to get, as you, 1 hour you took. So, yeah,
No, well,
it is a different beast to 2012, yes.
Well, what really hit me is going round and round in a circle for an hour.
Yes.
None of the cars had moved. So clearly they were utilising the area as some form of park and ride because there was no movement at all. Otherwise I wouldn't have kept persevering. Yeah. So your view is that this must stay until we've actually got some substitutes for Papakura, otherwise we're doing a disservice.
Exactly. And it's the O'Shaughnessy Street car park's only a short stroll from the station, so I presume that they stay there permanently for the...
Yeah, and I might add all the disability car parks were full as well.
Were they as well? Yeah.
Because I had a disability
park. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Just to add to the question, or the answer to the question, I can confirm, and I've just checked it with the Business Association Chair, there has been 22 new businesses that have opened up this year, so far this year, and I believe there's another 2 to open up in the next 2 weeks.
And they're not just $2 shops?
Absolutely not, no. The $2 shops are the ones that have moved out, and there are new businesses coming into town.
Thank you.
Councillor Cashmore.
Well, thanks, Mr. Chair. Good to see you guys. You know that I know Papakura very well. It was where I did all my shopping and commerce for years. I agree with you about the park and ride facility, unquestionably, because that you are servicing a region in the south, and Papakura is the second or third busiest station on the network. So unequivocal, stand beside you on that one. However, on the opportunities that is unveiled by the potential disposal of these sites, couldn't that not, first question, help with the car parking build, because you would be removing some that need to be replaced somewhere else? That might help. Secondly, is there a opportunity here for you to be involved with Panuku in the future developments? You need something to start the redevelopment of Papakura, and at the moment it is stalled. It is not really happening. You're getting a few shops, leases changing hands, but I haven't seen a new commercial building go up in that town for a long, long time. And it needs something to start it, and this potentially could be a Kickstarter. There's been apartments go up and small, there hasn't been any substantial build at all. So this could be an opportunity for that. And on your own, the Lee Orton planner's design, that showed a lot of high-rise and new developments. So couldn't this not be the start of that? And would you be willing to be part of that going forward?
To answer your question, yes, we would love to be part of that, and we have had a number of discussions with Panuku, and they've shown us potential plans and scopes. However, when it came to the report to the local board and for our business meeting, all of those plans had melted away. There was absolutely no reference to any potential good quality development on those 2 car parks. It all just melted away, and it was a very vanilla report that was put in front of us, and we were so disappointed that we just faced the prospect of low quality, quick buck type development, which would not help the future of a metropolitan centre at all.
But with your licence, Mr. G, you would not be adverse to working with Panuku to get an outcome that you see as more suitable for Papakura, as I'm sure what we all want.
That's what we'd love to. We'd love to, yes.
Excellent, thanks. Thanks, guys.
But not just now. It's not ready yet.
You need the car.
We need a parking strategy.
We need a parking strategy.
We need to wait till the parking strategy comes about.
And the development has to include parking underneath.
Okay, all right, all good. Okay, Councillor Newman.
Yeah, thank you. So I'll put up in a couple of amendments later on. My questions, because look, let me just clarify, you and because I'm certainly not opposed, and you're certainly not opposed to providing housing solutions, including social housing for those people in Papakura that need it.
Papakura is a testimony to that.
So what I'd like to first address for those who are not familiar is why people would choose to come and drive and park at the Papakura town centre as opposed to Pukekohe to catch the train. What's the difference that makes people want to drive to Papakura as opposed to Pukekohe?
The reliability of the service and the basically availability of parking, which is becoming almost impossible now.
What about the difference between electric network and the diesel network? Is that so? A person that gets on a Pukekohe, what happens?
Can I
for
just
the audience?
The frequency of the service from
The fact that you don't have to get out of one train.
They do,
walk to the
yes.
other platform.
The convenience.
That's
The
thing.
convenience, complete,
Okay.
convenience is not there.
So the
But
next.
the frequency of the trains too is
Okay. So the next question is in terms of if the alternative is the bus services, then we're having to negotiate through to the regional public transport plan. So can you confirm that in terms of the rollout of an expanded suite of contracted bus services over the next 3 years, we will see a slight increase in the scope of the service of the 376 service from Drury to Papakura bus, and that there may be an opportunity to negotiate a modest increase in the 378 bus service from Karaka Lakes into Papakura, but beyond that, there's no additional new bus services proposed that would cover this wider network in terms of urban bus services driving, connecting to the Papakura train station. Would that be a fair summation?
Yes.
Okay. And the final point would be, if we were to look at a period where these sites are retained, if it is the case, and look, I'd like Matthew Walker to pick up the OPEX, but if he can't, is that something that the Papakura Local Board, albeit reluctantly, would be prepared to help with the consequential OPEX if we get a retention for these sites for a period of time, whilst we get a proper Ollie solution in place around that park and ride? Not an at grade, we need a proper solution. Is that something the board's up for?
I did float that idea with the board members here, and we will have to look at what we're going to have to pull back on somewhere else, but they've agreed that yes, that would be an option.
Okay, we can talk to Matthew, but thank you, Chair.
Councillor Hills.
Through Chair. So obviously the Park and Ride's funded in the RLTP, the 12 million, but is the hold up the fact that NZTA want to do the bus station at the same time but aren't funding the bus station currently, or because the Park and Ride's still in our budget?
It's definitely in your budget. However, we were told last Wednesday that the funding for the car park alone, not with the bus depot, the car park alone was never enough. And yet we've been told by the Auckland Transport Board that the money was there, along with they were confident they would have the money from NZTA to provide sufficient funding for the multi-storey car park that was being proposed. Now they're telling us there has never been enough money to provide that. So, where that's coming from, I don't know.
So they believe the 12 million's now not enough for the Park and Ride?
Sorry, what's that?
Do they now believe that the 12 million's not enough for the Park and Ride?
Yes. Yeah.
We're waiting on a business plan.
Well, we're waiting on their business plan, which is supposed to be presented to us this month, but it's not on our agenda or workshops so far this month. But it's like last year's one, the exact same situation, and we never saw the business case study.
Councillor, there's a little bit of breaking news on that Ollie thing. Is it on this? The Ollies are ours, they're not Auckland Transport, so we just, let's just be.
What?
The Ollies are really our Ollies, so it's a little bit of breaking news for us to hear this, that this has been said to you as of last week. Mayor Goff.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to Brent, Bill, Felicity and Michael, thank you very much for your presentation. I think it's been really helpful, and I am quite familiar with Papakura, as you know, and from time to time I catch the train there. My wife drops me off at 6 o'clock in the morning, so I don't have parking problems. But it just seems to me, listening to the arguments, what you're asking for, I guess, is a deferral until the parking study comes out, which is, Brent, you said March, and you'll consider it in April, if I got your comments correct. And also, we don't know yet what the Auckland Transport decision on the park and ride is. There is 12 million aside in our budget, but I understand the cost, because of the land conditions, the cost of a multi-storey car park is 25 million. So there's a bit of a shortfall between those two figures. But I just want to make it clear, your argument today, I've listened carefully to what each of you have said. It's not about stopping the development of those car park spaces, but only proceeding with that, one, when you know what the overall picture is, and 2, you'd like to see developments on that compatible with the city centre and high-rise rather than low-rise. Have I got your argument correct?
And including car parking.
With car parking. Yeah. Okay. No. I think that all makes sense to me. The other question I have is just a minor one, really. I'm also familiar with the Cole Crescent car park, and we've paced it out, and it's 1.1 kilometres from the train station. Are people really parking in Cole Crescent to catch the train?
I park at the office and walk to the train, and it's just across the road from that Coles Crescent one.
Well, 1.1k.
Yeah.
Just across the road.
Headshed is
But your impression, I'm asking the question genuinely, your impression is that it is being used for...
It's being used for park and ride, because there probably a radius of a kilometre now from the railway station is where people are having to park right round the railway station and in the streets. The only place they haven't started to park yet, and I'm picking they will, is in the cemetery.
Can you park in the cemetery?
You can park
There
down.
is no time limit in the cemetery.
Not in the cemetery, Councillor.
And that's probably the dead centre of town. So.
Yeah. We, just another, Mr Chair, to comment, we had a old New World supermarket there, close to the train station. Unfortunately, people were parking there, but now they've closed it off.
Yeah.
So that's probably another 100 car parks.
That was 250 car parks.
250
car parks in that
that's
area.
Added. But this board only knows that the problem's getting worse. We know 800 cars are parked around our town, and it's growing every day. And that's, you ask where it's coming from, well, you can only surmise that, but they are coming. So, and it's growing every day. So we've got a problem, and we need you guys to help us, please.
And if we want to encourage, public transport, or even electric vehicles with charging stations, we need to look at the options and provide sufficient alternatives to the motor car. But if we haven't got the alternatives, then parking is essential.
Yep, we've heard that. And I've got 2 more people, and then we're going to cut this questions because we're 11:15, folks. So Member Piper and then Councillor Simpson.
Kia ora, Mr Chairman. Ka nui te mihi ki a koutou i tēnei wā. Just in the main report, talks a little bit about Ngāti Tamaoho. So did your local board engage with Ngāti Tamaoho, and what did they say?
We engaged just recently with them on the office space. Auckland Council, as I understand, has been talking to all iwi around this situation. So it's.
So I'll just say again, like Ngāti Tamaoho consider themselves quite principled in Papakura.
Yeah.
And so my question really was, have you engaged with them, and what did they say?
Well, I don't know what their view is. I know their view on the piece of land opposite, but I don't know what their view is with regard to these car parks.
So when you were presenting here today, you were presenting excluding their position as well?
Not at all. No. Well,
you don't know what it is, though.
Look, we know what their feelings are with regard to the sale of the Coles Crescent offices. We know what their views are, and I would imagine they're the same with the car parks. So I personally haven't engaged directly with them on this particular issue. We've been talking, trying to find ways of dealing with it with Panuku.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Through you, question 1 to Matthew and 1 to the local board. Matthew, why have we got a signed off Auckland Transport Capital Program based around our Ollie? 12 million, if it wasn't enough and it's supposed to start next year. If it was going to start in 4 years' time, I wouldn't be so worried about it this next year. It's my first question and why you're thinking about that. My second question to the local board will be, I take it you've read the report, and my understanding is from the answers to some of the questions that Auckland Transport are running this parking survey. correct?
Yes.
So are you saying at the report in point 6 of the report, and I will quote for you, further advice received from Auckland Transport confirming that the sites are now not required for car parking or transport infrastructure purposes can't be correct if they haven't completed the parking test?
Exactly, and I've even
Precisely.
underlined that. That's
Look,
exactly the point.
We understand Auckland Transport was approached in 2014 for their view on these pieces of land. They had promised us a parking survey as early as that. It's still not has still not come to us, and we've been assured that that parking survey is underway now, and that it will be complete in February, with a report coming to us April or May, and that's assuming that they get the report, that get the survey completed in that time.
But they've started.
They've told us they've started. We've not seen any evidence of it yet.
And Matthew, the 12 million, where did that come from, and what confidence did we have that that was right when we put this together?
So through the chair, I think your question's quite reasonable. I can only say that at the moment it looks like we haven't quite bottomed out the scope versus the budget, and they appear to be a little bit at odds, and there's more work to do, and we understand AT are currently doing that work, and we'd like to support them more with that and think about our wider OLI program in terms of a response as well. So we might have some further discussion about that in the item. Look, also underneath that, I don't mind accepting that we can improve our forecast for programs and capital expenditure on a 12 to 24 month horizon, so that when we land an LTP or an annual plan, people can have an expectation that the numbers there have been sufficiently scrubbed to give decision makers good confidence in the year ahead. And I would simply say we've got more work to do to improve that.
It's the Royal Weir, I know that you're talking about.
Maybe a solution is a fleet of Lime scooters.
There you go. They don't
But
want
where
to
do you
photo
park
op.
them, Bill?
Yes, I'd like to see the Deputy Mayor on the Lime scooter.
Missed me this morning.
Right, thank you guys, thank you Brent, Felicity and Bill and Michael for your presentation, and we're obviously going straight to the disposal report anyway, and we will deal with Papakura first. So I have a motion up there, Councillor Newman.
Thank you very much,
We'll
Mr.
move
Chairman.
that, and seconded by Councillor Collins. All those in favour?
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Yes, absolutely.
Much appreciated.
Right, there's no extraordinary business, so we're going straight on, and we have Anthony and Marion. Welcome.
Good morning. I take the report as read. I do have a few notes, so bear with me while I just go through them. As you'll be aware, in the report, there's 5 properties being reported for recommended for disposal. All have gone through the council rationalisation process involving consultation with departments, CCOs, mana whenua, relevant local boards, ward councillors and the Panuku board. We'll jump straight into the 2 properties in Papakura, 26 to 32 O'Shaughnessy Street and 36 Coles Crescent. As has been mentioned in the local board presentation, both are off-street car parks no longer required by Auckland Transport or Council's Community Facilities Department for transport car parking purposes. The local board has relayed to Panuku its desire to revitalise the Papakura Town Centre, given its status as a metropolitan town centre, and has requested that Panuku consider Papakura as an unlocked category in its priority development location program. Panuku has responded to this request and assessed Papakura against the criteria for an unlock. Although Papakura does not meet the criteria, Panuku has agreed to work with the local board and will still seek to support development outcomes in Papakura for urban renewal and housing purposes under its support development category, and we reported this back recently to the Planning Committee. Also included in the support categories are the surplus corporate accommodation site at 35 Coles Crescent and the park and ride location which has been mentioned today. Panuku considers that the sites located at O'Shaughnessy Street and Coles Crescent are suitable for development housing purposes and are great candidates to catalyse development in the town centre support the revitalisation of the Papakura Town Centre in line with the local board plan and the Papakura Metropolitan Centre Framework for Action Plan. Panuku has worked with the Papakura Commercial Group, which Lee Orton is the convener of, when investigating these urban renewal and housing outcomes. There is potential to enter into development agreements for both sites with interested local developers and interested iwi authorities to achieve these outcomes. The Papakura Local Board and the Papakura Commercial Group have been advised of these opportunities. I won't go into the local board's views, I'm sure they've been expressed well today. Auckland Transport has advised Panuku that the operational review to understand existing parking behaviour in the Papakura Town Centre is in its 2018-2019 work programme, but Auckland Transport has indicated that these two properties are deemed surplus to its requirements and it will not be in the review. This information has been communicated to the local board on the 10th of October, it was in the 24th of October report, and it is again in this report to the committee. Although the Papakura Local Board is opposed to a disposal, both sites provide the opportunity to deliver housing outcomes and contribute to the revitalisation of the Papakura Town Centre, which is an aspiration of the local board. If the two sites are approved for disposal, Panuku will continue to engage with the Papakura Local Board and the Papakura Commercial Group regarding development outcomes proposed for both sites. Thank you. Free for questions.
Questions? Councillor Newman.
Yeah, Chair, so just to foreshadow, I'm happy to move the item, but I am going to move it with the wording that I proposed for A, Roman numerals 1 and 2. So my question...
And you have a second, I believe.
And Sir John is happy to second that.
I just question, just a clarification. So you're moving the whole thing, but isn't it an amendment?
Yeah. Well, I've been told that procedurally. So what have you just?
Correct. So there's no motion on the floor. So
All right. So
Councillor
it can be
Newman's
amended
going to
in
move the
as it
new
is.
wording.
Great. Thank you. Just checking.
That my question really relates to the interface between what Panuku is proposing here and its understanding of the parking study. So you're confirming that your understanding is that the parking study will consider the parking needs in Papakura, but will not consider these assets as part of the solution for the parking needs.
Yes, that's correct. It's information received from Auckland Transport.
If I can take the opportunity to add to that, our colleagues at Auckland Transport have reviewed these car park sites again. Their position is that their position hasn't moved since 2015 when the O'Shaughnessy Street car park was assessed by the AT Strategy Department, and the Coles Crescent car park was reviewed again, and it is not, in their view, required for car parking. The review that Auckland Transport have agreed with the local board to undertake will look at the rest of Papakura and not these two sites, and that study is due to take place the latter half, the first half of this year.
Coming, is it? Others might have other questions, but...
Councillor Casey.
Yeah, I'm still smarting from Felicity's comment about cast-off social housing. So it's a question to either of you. Does Panuku have a view about social housing, housing for older people, or Kiwi Build as not being appropriate development for a metro centre or a town centre?
With respect to the O'Shaughnessy Street site, the neighbouring property owner is looking to develop his site with a view to putting a childcare centre on the ground floor and residential accommodation, hopefully Kiwi Build overhead. This proposed developer has approached Panuku with a view to acquiring this site to add to that, we think that Kiwi Build in that area is a good outcome for that site and for the area.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Chairman. Just asked previously a question around Ngāti Tamariki. In the report it says at paragraph 23, Panuku replied to Ngāti Tamariki confirming its interest to be noted on property file and information be considered by Council's governing body when the properties are recommended for disposal. I'm assuming that's this meeting, which is the Finance Performance Committee, including myself. In 24 then says Following the Finance and Performance Committee's consideration of the site's regular, Panuku will gain contact Tamaoho and Ngāti Whananga regarding matters of cultural significance. So, when you say in 23 that the information will be considered by Council's governing body, what information will that be when you haven't even got it?
Yes, through the Chair, can you please refer to the attachments which list the specific?
I have, and they say the similar things. So, what's the information relating to where Tamaoho have advised high cultural significance Papakura is, the information that you're providing to this meeting for this committee to consider?
Through the Chair, so the standard process is we engage with them. They've indicated that they've got a cultural and commercial interest in the site.
So that's the only thing you're telling us, that they have told you they have?
Yes, they
You've
have
got
said...
nothing to back that up and provide further detailed information for us to consider?
There is a separate document they have forwarded to Panuku as part of our consultation for other sites, such as the service centre at 35 Coles Crescent. The separate document indicates
Can I just stop you for a minute? Is it in this report?
No, it isn't.
Oh. Why not?
Apologies, we didn't include it as an attachment to a public report. I wasn't too sure whether the information they gave us was a public document.
Okay, I understand that, but it is quite relevant to paragraph 23.
Through the Chair, we opted to summarise their feedback to us. We have met with Ngāti Tamaoho about this site and about the other Coles Crescent site. They have indicated to us that they have a commercial interest and interest of cultural significance, and they have requested that we meet with them further should this committee approve this property for sale or development.
Okay, so... Which
we will do.
Just so I can get a better grasp on this, you haven't quite got the information about the cultural significance of the property, if there is any. They're saying culturally significant regards Papakura, so I get that in general. But if you're then proposing it to be recommended for disposal and it has cultural significance to it, who will buy that?
Through the Chair, as indicated, we have agreed with Ngāti Tamaoho that we will work with them should this property be considered for sale, just in the same manner as we are with the other Coles Crescent.
So I've asked these questions before, so let me be a little bit more detailed if I may, Mr Chairman. If the site is culturally so significant that nothing can be further developed on it, who will you dispose of it to?
Through the Chair, Ngāti Tamaoho have not indicated that it's so significant that it cannot be disposed of. They have indicated to us that that is of commercial interest to them as well, and we have said that we will work with them should.
So you've got a letter saying from them saying that they've told you that it's not that culturally significant to them.
No,
That's right. Well, can I ask you that question because, Mr Chairman, it says on 24. We'll find out what the cultural significance is after we decide to get rid of it, or dispose of it, should I say. And my question to you is, shouldn't you know that stuff before you decide to put it up for disposal, knowing who you could dispose it to? And I'm not talking about this property, I'm talking about all the properties that you deal with, and when you engage with Mana Whenua and Mātou Waka, and the significance they relate to these properties. Because my concern is that you go and get a resolution here today to dispose of, and then you go and find out, oops, once the existing things are removed or whatever, or it's on sold, you can't do anything with it because it's so significant. So,
the Chair, we have some information here that we're happy to read out to this committee from.
And through the Chair, our initial consultation is when we have properties up for potential disposal, we go to the interested iwi groups who have registered interest for the area.
I understand.
We list the properties and we do ask them, is there anything which would prevent a council disposal, or would you like other ways to recognise significance through signage, through other ways, or recorded on the property file? The message we got back from our contacts was that the general area, the Papakura, is of high significance.
Yes.
Nothing would prevent the disposal of the subject site, and that their commercial interest is being registered, and we will certainly follow it up with them. And we do follow up with a further response saying thank you for that.
Okay.
We haven't received anything further back which would prevent a disposal of the site.
So just to be clear, thank you for that. That's very helpful. So that's in writing from them, or an interpretation that you had?
It's in writing.
Okay, thank you.
All our consultation is done in
Oh,
writing.
thank you, that's what I wanted to hear. Because you should have provided that kind of information to us.
We will take that feedback
Yes,
on board.
please.
Thank you.
Yes, I can certainly look at providing it through the earlier memo I sent through to the IMSB as well. Yeah.
I'm on the Finance Performance Committee. Thank you.
I think that's been noted. Councillor Collins? No?
That was me.
Oh.
They look the same.
I'm saying then, they work together.
We look very similar.
You do?
Right.
Two questions. My first question is, it says in the report that further advice is received from Auckland Transport confirming that the sites are not required for car parking or transport infrastructure purposes. How is that statement correct if the parking survey is currently only just being done now?
Through the chair, as mentioned before, these two sites will not be part of the operational survey
Sorry,
that
apologise.
Auckland Transport are undertaking.
Sorry, apologise, you did say that. My second question is to the mover or the seconder. What is the consequential OPEX associated with the retention of this land? Because if the board is agreeing to pay, they need to know how much it is.
She's asking about the consequential of
And if they're going to pay, it's what, and please define will assist. It's either pay or don't pay. So do we know what that is?
We can work through the wording on that.
Cleaning.
Good question.
3 years. Do you know?
Through the chair, we don't know what the consequential OPEX is, but we understand that it is relatively low. But we don't have an exact figure for
Really
that.
low?
Yeah, through the chair, the Coles Crescent's pretty good condition rating. There's no works required. O'Shaughnessy needs some asphalting and some re-gravelling of the rear part of the property, which is a right-of-way access to the adjoining property. It's not actual car park area, but needs some work.
So potentially talking 200,000 over 3 years?
We are not sure. We can go away and get that information.
I suppose,
That's it.
Councillor Newman, my issue is I just want to know how much it's going to be and who's paying. And to that end,
We can change assist.
change assist to pay, and they need to have confidence that they're happy to pick that up. And my next question is, why did you want to keep it for 3 years and not wait?
Well, maybe I can address
Yeah.
that when it comes to my
Okay.
time to speak.
All right, sorry, all right.
We are suggesting up to 3 years.
I'd be happy to support you, councillor, if you took away will assist.
And up to 3 years.
And I will support it if it
speaking
says up
to
to
the
3
previous
years. Okay, we have Councillor
For sure,
Cashmore.
amendment of the amendment.
It's not an amendment.
No.
Amendment.
Councillor Cashmore?
No.
No? Councillor Walker?
Sure. You may not be able to answer this, but I'll ask the question anyway, and that's around the car parking review. Do the terms of reference around the car parking review take into account parking requirements for park and ride, the transport corridor to Hamilton that apparently is under consideration, and requirements for parking associated with shared vehicles, electric vehicles, bikes, lime scooters? Are they in the terms of reference for the car park review?
Through the chair, my understanding from Auckland Transport, I don't know if they are, but my understanding from Auckland Transport is that the park and ride demand is quite well understood by Auckland Transport, and that the business case for the new park and ride facility building is being progressed at present, taking into account the immediate and future needs for the park and ride. The review is, as I understand it, a tactical review to understand how the current car parking, both public and private, can be utilised going forward. The study is due to actually take place in February, with a view for the work to be complete by May. It is, we have asked the question as to whether and why these two properties will not be will not be included. Our understanding from Auckland Transport is that they've been reassessed, and given that the Coles that the O'Shaughnessy Street property has been deemed surplus to requirements by the Auckland Transport Board. It will not be included in the study, and the Coles Crescent car park was never on the Auckland Transport Fixed Asset Register. It was always a council asset, and however it has been looked at recently, and when Anthony undertook his expression of interest for rationalisation, Auckland Transport chose not to express an interest in car parking following an assessment at that point that it was no longer needed.
So the assumption that I'll make based on all that is that the short answer is no. And I just want to speak to this because on an ongoing...
No, we're on questions.
Okay. I'll speak to it when I have the opportunity then.
Okay. Right. Councillors, remember we're only talking about 1, 2 and 3, and we've got a new 1 and 2. I'm actually getting a feeling around the table that I think if the mover and seconder put up to 3 years that this would go through, and we probably don't need to have a long discussion about it.
Yep.
But it's up to you guys, so I've got 5 people now want to ask questions, and so Councillor Bartley, Councillor Filipaina, Councillor Cooper, Councillor Hulse. So it's up to you, but I mean, I think we could almost resolve this with a word or two.
I'm happy to just talk to this now if it persuades
So
people.
I'm asking those 4, are there vital questions you want to ask? Because we could move to have Councillor Newman talk to this straight away. We might shortcut it, that's all. So I'm asking...
I still want to ask a question about...
okay, right, Councillor Butt.
Ipuna. Okay. Thank you, Mr Chair, and through you. I want to pick up on what the Mongakiki Tamaki Local Board requested, that there's be some encouragement with Housing New Zealand to identify Crown land for possible land swaps in Mongakiki Tamaki. Can that be done? Because that is what they condition their support on the disposal on.
Through the Chair, apologies, I haven't gone through the preamble for the Waipuna Road properties that Councillor Barclay is talking about. Do you mind if I just quickly give the preamble so other committee members up to speed? So 22 and 28A Waipuna Road are residential properties that were acquired for transport purposes in 2007 by the former Auckland City Council. It was for the purposes of a new route through Waipuna Road. They are no longer acquired by Auckland Transport. They've been transferred over to Council. Panuku are looking to work with Housing New Zealand, who own adjacent property, and also with property that Council has already approved for disposal. There's an opportunity there to develop, provide a greater development and provide housing outcomes. So at the Mangakiki Local Board meeting 2 weeks ago, as Councillor Barclay has mentioned, the local board did have a number of questions and did resolve to support the disposal of the properties, but did want to engage with the Crown through Housing New Zealand, TRC, HLC in terms of potential land swaps. The advice to the local board on the night from the local board services relationship manager and myself was these conditions can't be attached to this specific disposal, and my understanding was that the local board would initiate their own discussions with the Crown separate to what Panuku and Auckland Council were trying to initiate here. And that's what the resolution was. It was endorsing the disposal and that the local board would start their own discussions with Housing New Zealand.
My apologies, Councillor Bartley. I didn't realise I was actually probably dealing with 1, 2 and 3. I didn't realise you wanted to talk about Mount Wellington.
Through the Chair, may I just do the preamble for Butler Ave as well? I can see Councillor Filipaina probably questioning me as well.
No, I wouldn't do that to you, my friend. I was just going to acknowledge the local board sort of saying we will, once the revocation is done, and we can help towards the long-term plan selling of assets and non-service land. Just our bit towards that.
Okay, so we've just got an update here. My understanding is Councillor Newman and Councillor Walker are actually willing, with this amendment to 1 and 2, are willing to move all 6. Okay, within 7 within A plus B. Is that?
Yeah, that's what I'm comfortable to do.
There's still Councillor Cooper, Hills, Hulse and Tuckbury. So
it was just one was I thought I heard Councillor Newman say up to 3 years, which I'd support. But my question is really around the opportunities and the risk. It talks about lost opportunity to enhance Papakura Town Centre, and we've talked about supporting the support process. So if there's no sites to sell, no sites to develop, is that still a possibility? So if these don't sell, is there any chance to do the support thing if there's no vacant sites? That's what I'm trying to understand, if Panuku have offered that.
So through the chair, Panuku has offered the Papakura local board assistance really in terms of we've agreed that we will look at all of the sites in Papakura that that will have development opportunities through a support lens. Through our assessment that was previously reported to the Planning Committee, there were 4 sites that have got decent development opportunities. These 2 car park sites, the Papakura Park and Ride site, which we are working directly with Auckland Transport on and due to go out with a commercial strategy early in the new year, and also the recently deemed surplus corporate property sites. So those
the 4 are these 2 are included in that?
These 2 are included in that 4.
So then there's a bit more limited scope to do any kind of changes in the town centre if you take 2 off the table. Is that what?
That's right.
Thank you. Oh well, so be it then.
Councillor Hills.
Hills or Hulls?
Hills, and then Hulls.
Through you, Chair, mine was sort of a similar question to Councillor Cooper's, because the way this would go if these 2 properties were put up for disposal, you'll be going to developers to work out a plan for, you know, Panuku outcomes through the SOI. So it's not just you're not just going to sell them off. Going to actually work for a positive development outcome, and if you don't get one, I assume they don't get sold.
That's right. Through the chair, Panuku is very cognizant of the metropolitan zoning in Papakura, and we're very aware of the local board's aspirations for the town centre. We've been working with the commercial strategy group, which has been headed up by Lee Olton, and we should these properties be approved for disposal, we would look to seek development outcomes on those sites. We have given the Papakura local board assurance that we wouldn't just put them on the market for sale as a straight disposal. We would look for controlled outcomes through a development agreement.
Okay, so this would be potentially a missed opportunity to help get some of the work done that under that plan from Leoton or for us. We can't do a unlock or transform, so this would be one way of getting some of that work.
This would be, I suppose, a current lost opportunity in that we have a couple of developers that are interested in these 2 sites. They're local Papakura developers who know and understand these sites, in particular the 36 Cold Crescent property, which is heavily constrained, and the developer is proposing to retain the car parking requirements for the adjacent kindergarten, retain the access across the site to the service lane, and to provide a number of, I think it's about 36 apartments. So.
And sorry, through the chair, and install stormwater retention tanks to resolve the flooding issues.
That's right. So, as I said, the property is heavily constrained. It is in a flooding zone. It has stormwater issues, and the developer has indicated, one of the developers interested has indicated the provision of stormwater retention tanks to alleviate the stormwater. So that is, in our view, a very good outcome for 36 Coast Crescent. Should it be retained in the short term, possibly those opportunities may come up again, but it certainly at this point is a current lost opportunity.
Councillor Halls.
So I'm still confused. Are we adding the up to or not?
I think Councillor Newman wants to speak to it first, but I think it's going to happen, but
So
I can't say that.
So my question is, without that, it's an entirely different proposition.
Exactly.
How can we, I guess, it's either going to happen or not. So we can't ask questions about the. I'm sorry, it's just a bit confusing. You know, you put up a recommendation and then you signal you're going to change it. But to me, if you're genuine, you actually put it up there. So is it going up or not?
He'd like to speak.
Well,
If I'm allowed to speak, I'll speak to it, but I'm not being inauthentic in my reasoning.
Okay, so I will reserve my right to speak when I finally understand what it is that's being proposed, because the two are entirely different, Mr. Chair. I will not support this in its current term. I will consider if it's changed.
Thank you. Right. Member Todd.
Kia ora, Mr. Chairman. So this is questions, and I thought it was just 1 and 2, so that's why I stopped short. But there's a question that's actually flowed on for the Papakura car parks, and that is, you just said to me earlier about there's a process, and when I asked the local board, they said they'd been engaging over 36 Coles, Crescent. Now you've just advised you've got a prospective developer. So my simple question is to you, is that Ngāti Tamuoho?
No, it's not. We've got a number of developers. That was an example
Okay.
of what we could do with the site,
no
given it's
sufficient.
heavily
I got
constrained.
that. Thank you.
Yeah.
So my other questions relate to Waipuna Road, and after fleshing out there was further feedback around Tamuoho and the Papakura car parks. Is there any more information to be got on the Waipuna Road properties around Ngāti Whanaunga?
Yeah, through the chair, I've gone back 3 times to that certain iwi entity. They have promised further information. They haven't provided it.
Nothing
I went back as recently as yesterday.
Okay, thank you.
So, yeah, look, my humble apologies, but, and I don't know where, but it's going to be through you, Chair, where this question should be pointed at, but the 3 years is a concern for me. It really is. That's based on what I've heard. So I think the question is to Councillor Newman. Councillor Newman, I mean, you know, up to 3 years is an issue with me, though the question is, if it's up to a year.
I'm in a queue to speak to this.
Well, no, what I'm asking you the question because I want to know, because if it's 3, I'm not prepared to support it. That's the reason I'm asking in regards to a compromise. So, I mean, if you want to wait until
Okay,
the
right,
debate,
no, we're now
but
moving
the question is asked.
Thank you for that. We are now moving to Councillor Newman to speak to his amendment.
I've got a question.
Oh, sorry, Mayor Goff, there's a question.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. My question is this. I'm struggling with a description that there's a parking review that's going to take place starting in February and reporting in May, but it's going to exclude these 2 sites. My first question is, why would you exclude the sites when we want a full picture of what's going to happen? And then I'm also struggling with the fact that the parking review comes after we get an announcement, apparently, from Auckland Transport about what they're doing with the park and ride building. I cannot see why those 2 shouldn't be one and the same. It is totally illogical to say, this is what we're going to do with the park and ride, and by the way, then we're doing a parking review. You do your bloody parking review, and then you decide, you take that into account as an input into what you're going to do in the park and ride building. And then secondly, you know, and I will say it, Mr. Chairman, so I struggle with the original resolution, but I also struggle with the amendment, because if we're going to say we're going to lock in keeping this land for 3 years without having any regard to what the park and ride building would be, you know, we all want to go to heaven and none of us want to die. So we want to spend $25 million on a parking building, but we won't sell $2.3 million of assets to return to council. You can't have it both ways. So I'm also joining the voices around this table of saying, for heaven's sake, in our resolution, please keep some flexibility so that if we get a good resolution on the park and ride building, we then say that overcomes the need for keeping a relatively small number of car parking spaces here, and some of the money from that can go towards the cost of what we might do in the park and ride. So I'll come back to the question. The question to you guys is, why the hell would you
Careful, careful.
come down to a decision on a park and ride and then do the parking review and not the other way around?
So,
Heaven and hell in the same speech.
Okay. I will in defence, remember this is Panuku, not Auckland
No.
Transport. So
I'm asking for Panuku's view
Thank you.
on what I've just put. I understand
no.
that it's Auckland Transport's decision, but to me, somebody might around this table might be able to explain it to me, but I can't see why you'd make a decision and then do the review.
I'm just clarifying that we don't want to have...
Yeah, I'm not
Marion
crucifying
and Anthony in the
Panuku
government.
over this. It's,
Marion.
but you can perhaps convey
Anthony.
our view to Auckland Transport.
I can do that. My understanding through the chair is that that the park and ride business case, we've been working very closely with Auckland Transport on the park and ride business case. It isn't concluded, and it does take into account the parking requirements. We understand from Auckland Transport the parking requirements for the park and ride are very well understood. We, as mentioned, will be working directly with them in terms of a commercial strategy for that park and ride site. Given that these two properties are not on their fixed asset register, they have indicated to us that they will not be included. However, we can go back to them with this committee's view that they should be included.
Thank you, and I would appreciate it if you'd do that. Through you, Mr. Chair.
Right. Councillor Newman. We are there.
Yeah, firstly, I don't appreciate any of my colleagues suggesting that I'm not genuine in seeking a solution here. So the purpose of the amendment was to seek to try and give time for the purpose of coming up with a solution to what is being a disconnected mess. Do I have the call?
Yeah, no, sorry, I was reading.
No, it's all right. I had comment on my right. A disconnected mess in terms of what parts of the organisation are taking responsibility for delivering a solution in this space. I'm very comfortable, and I'm sure the seconder of the for 1 and 2 is happy to put for up to 3 years, with respect to the OPEX for the local board to pay for the OPEX, Councillor Simpson, although I have to say, and perhaps if the officers agree with this, frankly, I'm not quite sure why the local board should have to fund the OPEX if it indeed is a situation whereby we need to be retaining these for a period of time, but the local board to fund the OPEX of these properties for up to 3 years. Chair, I think that the Mayor has encapsulated very well the conundrum that we have here, whereby we do need to complete the car parking study, but as Marion has pointed out, that current study will not consider these assets because they are not deemed to be serviceable assets that are necessary. I think that's a wrong assumption from Auckland Transport's perspective. They don't consider 36 Coles Crescent because they don't own the asset. Well, the reality is it's a car park and it's an asset in the Papakura Town Centre, and we are the council. If we're going to be joined up in our thinking, we would first and foremost think about what is in the town centre, what makes a town centre. Car parking helps to make the town centre. Therefore, that needs to be considered as part of the analysis, and the Mayor is quite correct in his consideration of that. So the second thing is the sequence of this work. You would want to complete your analysis before you consider options for disposal. What's being considered here is a resolution for disposal, which is regarded as quite separate to the car parking study. I think we should resequence that. With respect to the master plan is about the Papakura Town Centre as a metro centre, and some colleagues might want to think about trying to achieve a support via Panuku for a good outcome. That's absolutely intrinsic to what is trying to be achieved in Papakura, but the master plan at its essence is about getting people into the Papakura Town Centre. Not all of them will live there, but getting people into the Papakura Town Centre And fortunately or unfortunately, whatever your perspective may be, car parking is part of that. In fact, it's part of Papakura more than it is part of some parts of Auckland, because we have a higher level of private vehicle mode share compared to other parts of Auckland. And that will continue to be the case for quite some time. And the chair of the Papakura Local Board confirmed that we have some bus services, but actually parts of this network are very poorly serviced, and other parts of the Auckland region in the south don't have any bus service coverage whatsoever. I want to apologise to Councillor Casey, because if the inference is that Papakura is a community of snobs and we don't accommodate social housing, that is wrong. We do, and we need to support social housing in the future, and we will have social housing in the Papakura Town Centre, and I will vigorously support that outcome. And because we need to reflect the sum of all parts. But the final comment that I wish to make, Chair, goes to the issue of the Papakura Ollie. Now, I haven't had a chance to sit down and talk to the Mayor yet about what it is that the Mayor has included in the Mayor's proposal in relation to the Papakura Park and Ride. And my question really to the Mayor is, what does he think he is funding with that bid? Because the advice that has been provided by Auckland Transport to the Papakura Local Board and to me is that no decision has been made by the Auckland Transport Board, but the options that will be presented to the Papakura Local Board in 2019, the options being looked at is providing additional at-grade parking. This will increase the park and ride capacity in the vicinity of 130 spaces, and that the high level cost of that option is around $4 million. Providing a multi-storey parking facility, creating an additional 300. The high level cost for that option is around $25 million, and it's unlikely to be the recommended option. The high cost is predominantly due to the poor ground conditions, except that. Another option is providing a single deck parking facility, which will create an additional 70 spaces, a high level cost of $12.5 million. The preferred option, commencing design, would take place in March 2019. All of these options will require NZTA funding, and due to the poor ground conditions, construction will have to be done over the summer. It's recommended that construction commence in October, November 2019, and complete with completion being early 2020. That's for option 1, which is at grade. Mid 2020 for option 2. That's with the single. That's with the multi-storey. And for option 3, late 2020. So we've got at least 2 years to get the Ollie solution in place, which is why I think there needs to be some time. So I'm very happy with whatever wording we come up with, but which gives us the ability to deliver the park and ride Ollie in whatever form it's agreed, because that's necessary in this part of Auckland, which receives all the parking from, well, a lot of the parking from Franklin. They receive that because, of course, the disincentive for parking at Pukekohe is getting your diesel, go to Papakura, exit the diesel, go to another platform, get into the electric train and continue north. So that is the purpose of the wording, Chair, and I'm happy to move.
Right, now councillors, really I think the only issue is people agreeing with up to 3 years or not agreeing with 3 years. Now I've heard Councillor Filipina had an opinion, but so I don't think we really need to have people commenting on transport strategy for South Auckland or anything. I think we're narrowing it down to the up to 3 years is my, so unless someone, because I know Councillor Walker was, Wayne Walker indicated he wanted to make a speech on it, but I don't know whether it's necessary. But so I'm asking, we could put this now.
I move we put the motion. I haven't spoken to it.
I wanted to speak to it.
Sorry?
I did want to speak to it.
Okay, right.
I moved a procedural motion if there's a seconder.
You can decline it, your chair.
Needs to be
Heard
seconded.
the vote rather than your speech.
Yeah, point of order, you've only had one speaker.
Sorry?
You've only had
Needs to
one
be
speaker.
seconded. It doesn't exist.
So you can't move a procedural motion after only one speaker.
Okay, we've got Councillor Filipino and then we've got Councillor Wayne
Chair, I will not be supporting this because of the 3-year term. This is why I asked the question of Councillor Newman. And, you know, His Worship the Mayor explained it in regards to the strategy, and I think I would have supported up to a year, especially in regards to this. And, you know, my reasons are bullet point number... Well, on number 31 bullet point, lost opportunity to develop with members of the public and interest iwi authorities to deliver urban renewal, housing outcomes in line with Panuku development objectives, the Auckland Plan Enhanced Papakura Town Centre. I then have a look at number 32. Should we end up approving the disposal? And I mean, at the moment, I would support a year. But it was also around revitalising the Papakura Town Centre. Now, Councillor Newman didn't want to do that, so, and I'm not prepared to end up for 3 years having the property there. I'm thinking about the local board and with the OPEX, and I think that if they're willing to hold on to the property, they should be paying for the OPEX in regards to both properties. And I am putting aside the Auckland Plan outcomes and the long-term plan disposal of non-strategic assets. This is why I would be happy to vote for up to a year, but that is not an option, and as a result, I will not be voting for up to 3 years. Thank you.
Councillor Wayne Walker.
Sure. I want to support Councillor Newman, and the reason for that is I'm really concerned about our ability to meet our low carbon requirements. And as far as I'm concerned, an instance where you've got parking that supports park and ride, that supports the possibility of parking for plug-in EVs, bikes and other things is paramount. There may be an interim requirement at this point, but so be it. And my real concern is that on a decision by decision basis, we're actually not doing that consistently. And this is another example. We need to make those changes and those shifts immediately. So for that reason, I'm supporting this, and also because I support what I've heard from the local board, and everything they've said to me makes sense.
Well, good. Right, we're going to put the motion.
Sorry, I'm speaking, Mr. Chair.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Darby.
I haven't spoken. I intend to move an amendment by replacement, the words 18 months, replacing the words 3 years. So up to 18 months. I move an amendment accordingly.
Have a seconder?
And I call for a second.
I'll second it.
Oh,
you want to?
Yeah, no, I'd second 18 months after my
Right,
year.
well, now we've got an amendment, we'll put that up, so...
So just briefing, speaking very briefly, look, I've heard the concerns of the board and Councillor Newman. This work does not take that long. We all know that work does not take that long. There is some urgency in not getting people just into park in Papakura. There's some urgency about getting people to live in Papakura. I don't want to see people living in cars and car parks. I actually want to see them living in homes in Papakura. Have we not quite got the dire situation that we have in Auckland, where we are not housing Aucklanders? And it happens in the south as well. Please, let's give some urgency to housing people on these addresses, not just parking them temporarily on these addresses. We've got to be consistent, Mr. Chair, and it concerns me that we are just putting this off. Let's make some room to accommodate Aucklanders in homes, not in cars.
Okay, so we have an amendment and it's getting worked on. It'll pop up. We're just taking, so we're obviously taking 3 to 6, 3 to 7, I should say, has not been changed. So we have an amendment speaking against the amendment.
Can I have a question for the amendment?
Okay. Yep.
My question to the mover of the amendment is, why is that necessary if it's up to 3 years? It could well be done within the 18 months. Are we not just, you know, making an amendments for the sake of making amendments? It could well happen earlier. I think everyone's got the gist around this. It needs to happen with urgency. I am asking why you have chosen to put a finite, well, you're lowering the 3 years to 18 months, when it could well be your amendment as part of the original anyway.
Well, I think it's pretty obvious because there's a risk of the can being kicked down the road another 18 months.
Yeah.
And we know that the work can be done within that time.
What, I mean, how do we know that?
Well, there is a risk. Councillor Hoss.
Just a question. I've got a huge amount of sympathy for Councillor Darby's point. So my question is, and I think the Mayor raised it quite rightly, there is work being done on the parking strategy, and it is quite, you know, we argued this at the workshop yesterday. Why does Auckland Transport have the ability to move property in and out of the portfolio? The portfolio is actually Council's portfolio and should be discussed by Council. That's, I think, a legislative amendment we need to make, and the sooner that happens, the better. So, you know, Auckland Transport, you're on notice. The reality is, however, we do need to provide parking. No one's arguing with that. The bit that Councillor Darby raises is if a fantastic development comes our way, which addresses the issue of parking, but also houses people, not just cars, because the Zach Grade car park is just about cars, and as a C40 city, that's not our business. We're in the business of housing people, not cars. If a fantastic opportunity comes our way, just even signalling the 3 years, to me, just sends the wrong signal. So you know, I would have supported absolutely us grabbing the opportunity and selling this for a better development, but I am sympathetic to the car park issue. So my question is, how quickly can this piece of work be done that looks at these pieces of land, as well as it might have been contained, I'm sorry, Councillor Newman, yours was a very clear but quite long piece of information, and I may have missed it contained within there. How quickly can we do this car park strategy study?
Through the chair, my understanding, we've just spoken to Auckland Transport before this meeting. They do apologise. They wanted to be here but couldn't at short notice. My understanding is from them that if we look at putting these two properties back in, they did indicate they are out of scope, but if they are requested to put them back in to undertake the parking survey, not a parking strategy, a parking survey, that initially they indicated to us that it would be done by May this year. There would be a slight delay, but it would probably be done by the end of the 2019 calendar year.
Okay, because that's really the issue, Mr. Chair. The only thing I'm hearing from our Papakura people is we don't want to lose parks because we're trying to support public transport. Kia ora, and good on them for that. But if we have the idea of what we've got and what we need, and that can be dealt with in a fantastic development, I think that is the hook. I think the 18 months, 3 years is not the hook. It's understanding the parking requirements and grabbing the opportunity to have those addressed in a really good development. So, you know, I think we are dancing on the head of it at the moment. So I'm going to support the 18 months because I think that gives us a chance to do it.
Okay, so I'm leading a little bit of blending of question and statements here because we're almost there. So now going to Councillor Cooper.
I just want to support this because if we look at the Howick issue, the local board were given, I think, a year, and it was about 4 or 5 years down the track before we ever got to it. So I think if we give this a bit of sense of urgency, look, if it had to have a couple more months at the end, whatever, but I think and the other issue is, you put it smack bang, you know, again, another 3 years out, people are coming up to the elections within that year and people get very, you know, scared by the horses. So I think you put it into another, within several months of an election, which doesn't make it popular again, so, which we always get hamstrung by.
So I don't think there's any more questions. So we've got Councillor Newman, Councillor Wayne Walker, and Councillor, is that Wayne Walker or John Walker?
I had a question.
Oh, okay. Okay, we'll take the questions.
Okay, my question just goes to the statement that was made around a survey. As far as I'm concerned, what's implicit in Councillor Newman's motion is around a review, and I would suggest that that review considers the strategic issues that the Mayor raised, for example. If we just have a survey, that's just going to be a survey of the current situation, and that is not going to inform us at all. It's the changes and the strategy that that needs to cover. So my understanding, Mr. Chair, is that review incorporates the notion of strategy, not just a survey.
I'm not sure whether that was a question, but anyway. Councillor Newman.
Yeah, I'm just incredulous, Chair. I won't be supporting this amendment. I find it extraordinary that we would be having a... Look, by my own counsel, I can assure colleagues that I and other elected members from the South absolutely own the dilemma that we have in relation to housing people in need. Social housing is one of the most critical issues in the South, and so be assured, Councillor Darby, that this is absolutely of critical consideration for me and critical consideration to other members from Manurewa Papakura, including the Papakura Local Board. I think the issue here is that you can't consider the dilemma of the lack of joined up organisational thinking in relation to parking just in terms of the survey. There is a need to get the solution in place around the Papakura Park and Ride Ollie. This is something that Callum Penrose has been talking about for 6 years, and we're still not there. The purpose of the wording, and I made the change, the wording, up to 3 years, is not to kick the can down the road so that we can have no solution. The purpose is to provide time to implement the solution, which is what is necessary in what is a difficult environment with poor geotechnical profile of the land where the park and ride would be built. Auckland Transport's management team don't even have their options analysis and recommendations ready for the board of Auckland Transport yet. This was something that I think former Chair McEntee made a public announcement. This is what was about to happen 3 years ago. He's nodding at me. We're in agreement. And of course it hasn't happened yet, because we continue to not be able to land a solution that is fundable for the park and ride. This is more than just a survey. This is about an implementation of a solution. And goodness, wouldn't that be good to get the infrastructure in place to meet the needs of a town centre that is a metro centre, so that it is resilient for the future, actually resilient for the now as well as the future. So I think that this will require up to 3 years, but the wording up to was wording that was proposed by me to try and assuage the concern. If it happens in 6 months or 12 months or 18 months or 2 years or whatever, fine, but up to 3 years was a deliberate word choice from me to address the concerns that we were hearing. So I won't be voting for this amendment, and I think that we should vote the amendments down and just vote to adopt the wording as was initially proposed by myself and Councillor Walker.
Councillor Watson.
Oh, thanks, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I think this quibbling over 18 months is not really very helpful here. I think we were moving towards a common sense approach there of up to 3 years. If it takes a year or 18 months, I'm sure the local board would be more than happy with that. I think that would be correct to say that, yes. So there are obviously a series of moving parts here, and I think what's becoming quite apparent with the Papakura local board, but also with other local boards, that they're taking a more strategic, long-term view than other parts of council, and this has been reflected here today. We obviously got a situation in Papakura where there's a pretty dire need as far as parking goes, and particularly parking that goes to accessing the train station. We've had this stick chucked into the spokes in terms of the park and ride and what may or may not happen there, and it's obvious that's not going to be a quick piece of work. So I would have thought the entirely pragmatic option, given the very compelling arguments put up by all the members of the local board, was to go for that up to 3 years to allow sufficient time. For goodness gracious, if we know anything about the Auckland Council, it's better to err on the side of time than it is to assume things will get rushed through. If there is a resolution within that time, well, great. That can happen. Perhaps, you know, the local board, if they're really looking to deal to their commuter problems, they should maybe look at trying to get a ride share program going where they might be able to subsidise each commuter up to $14 to get to the train station. That might be another option they could consider. But I would suggest, ladies and gentlemen, we had a solution on the table here that was meeting with everyone's approval, and this is just kind of irritating quibbling, to be honest.
Goff and then Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, I absolutely accept the need for proper park and ride facilities at Papakura. That's why it's in the Merrill proposal. The Merrill proposal says that we begin spending this year 5.9, that's 2019-20, 5.9 million as the first tranche. What we tend to do around council is we keep extending out deadlines, and the more you extend out deadlines, the more officials will take the time that you've given them. I would like to see pressure put on Auckland Transport to deliver this study and to deliver it quickly. I would like to see a solution brought forward for the people in Councillor Newman's ward because they need a solution. We may, of course, be dancing on the head of a pin on this. Less than 3 years, could be within 18 months. But the reason that I'm supporting the amendment moved by Councillor Darby is because I believe that we are sending a clear message to Auckland Transport. We are putting in our budget proposal the money to start spending in the coming financial year. If we say we're going to leave it 3 years before we make a decision on this land, the message subliminally goes to Auckland Transport, well, they're not in any particular hurry. I think we are in a hurry. We want to get this job done. And of course, if they didn't do it within the 18 months, then there's no reason that you have to suddenly sell the land within 18 months. But I think you do need to send a clear message. We want the park and ride. We want to address the parking need. We would also like, if you do the park and ride properly, to be able to use the land available for construction of housing where we also have a real need. So, you know, while up to 3 years I was happy to support that, I'm worried that it might send the wrong message, and if we put pressure on to get Auckland Transport to do it more quickly, let's use this opportunity to do so. The budget has got the money there as my proposal to you for 1919, 1920 and each of the 2 years thereafter. If we keep kicking the can down the road, A, we won't get the park and ride facility we need, and B, we won't get the housing. So I'm suggesting that there is an advantage in the message we send by making it less than 18 months. It still allows the parking study and the park and ride study to be done in plenty of time, but sends the message, let's get on and do it.
Right, we were almost there, but we're not there now. We have Councillor Fletcher and Councillor Cashmore. Then I'm going to take a vote on the amendment by division.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was delighted to see Sir John Walker and Councillor Newman put up the motion today, because I feel that this council have really betrayed and let Papakura down. I know that the Papakura Park and Ride has been in the SOI for the last 6 years. It might be 5, but I think it's 6. And I know from the period I served on the board of Auckland Transport, every year we thought we were there. Every year it was going to happen. And in the meantime, Papakura has just been left to flounder. And I am deeply ashamed of the response that this council, through AT and the levers we have let this situation occur. So I support Sir John Walker and Councillor Newman, and I support those who want to see this work done more quickly. But having taken into account the historical failures of AT, I think it is better to have up to, because we won't have to have it come back repeatedly. So I'm very keen that we can all come together in a consensus to say we actually want to see this fixed for Papakura. We need to have a coherent and comprehensive strategy, as has been clearly articulated by the mover and the seconder, and I think we're actually getting a little bit petty in this amendment, so I will be supporting the motion as put forward by Councillor Newman and Sir John Walker. Thank you.
Right, Councillor Cashmore and then Councillor Simpson.
Thanks, Mr Chair. Very, very briefly, just for councillors' information, the structure plan for Drury, which borders Papakura on the south, is landing early next year, and that is including extra stations and park and rides as well. So that timing this work, bringing it in tighter, actually helps land that structure planning with a coordinated response. So those two pieces feed on each other, simultaneous in delivery would be good.
Thank you for reminding us of that. Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Look, I think this is quite an amazing situation. I think we're all singing from the same song sheet and arguing between 18 months and up to 3 years, which could well be 18 months or 12 months. Because the local board came to us with their issues around this, I've reached behind the table and spoken to the local board, and their preference is to go up for 3 months, up to 3 years. I think everyone around this table acknowledges as soon as possible, but it was the board that came to us with a slight change. I think the other thing is that both the councillors for this area are moving and seconding the original motion, and we should be mindful that these are the people who represent this area. And I think for me, if that's good enough for them, for both of them to share that, plus the local board, it's good enough for me. So I'll be supporting the original motion.
Okie dokie. Right, by division. Councillor Bartley.
Oh, thank you, Mr Chair. I just want to offer my support for the original motion put by Councillor Newman and Councillor Walker, because they are the councillors for those areas. So that's where I'm at. And I'm not sure what the process is if I vote against this. Do we get the chance to vote for the original motion?
Yeah, no, this
falls, it's the original.
If this fails,
Cool.
we go back
and,
to the...
and I just want to offer my support to the Papakura local board, because I lived in Papakura, so I know the area and I know the issues there regarding parking. So I empathise with what they're going through, considering what we're going through in Panmure with the parking at the moment.
By division, putting this. Right.
Amendment.
Thank you, Chair. A division has been called on the amendment. Councillor Clow.
Yes.
Councillor Bartley.
No.
Councillor Casey.
No.
Councillor Cashmore.
Yes.
Councillor Collins.
Against.
Councillor Cooper.
For.
Councillor Darby.
Yes.
Councillor Filipina.
Aye.
Councillor Fletcher.
No.
Mayor Goff.
Yes.
Councillor Hills.
No.
Councillor Holtz.
Aye.
Councillor Lee.
No.
Councillor Newman.
No.
Councillor Sayers.
No.
Councillor Simpson. Against. Councillor Stewart.
No.
Member Taipari.
For.
Councillor Sir John Walker. Councillor Wayne Walker.
No.
Councillor Watson.
No.
Councillor Young.
No.
Right, it's lost. So we're going back to the original motions. I'm going to put all of them, A and B. A, which is 1 to 7, and B. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against.
Okay, want it recorded?
1 and 2.
Do you want it recorded? No,
Yes, recorded, thanks.
Okay. Right, well, I think we just might have a 10-minute break.
Thank you.
I'll do it in 18 months, Daniel.
Do it in 9.
Take 7.5 years.
Oh, yeah, they do, but all good.
So let's go, so the substantive motion.
I'd be really annoyed if
What's happening?
10-minute break.
10 minutes, all right.
Friday.
I've forgotten. I had something in my head I was going to say to you, Sharon. I've forgotten. It was probably a lie, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. I'd never lied. Yeah. Cool in here.
Because you've got air conditioning.
Yeah, I know, but I thought because it was quite warm outside, I thought it would be okay-ish in here.
Check the roof, I think, kept it in the roof. When do we have to make a decision by?
Oh, I've got to fill it at the school building this week, I think.
Yeah,
To register for the call.
Yeah, I can't go through it because it's got to go east.
The rest of the meeting should take 10 minutes.
Shouldn't take long, right?
Don't speak too loudly.
Right, Alistair, please. Welcome, Ross.
Good afternoon, Chair. I'll try to be brief. The Auckland Regional Amenities Funding Board each year puts out a draft funding plan which sets out the level of funding they want to provide to each of the 9 amenities. Auckland Council, like the rest of the public, gets to put in a submission on that draft funding plan. Slightly inconveniently this year, the funding plan will be published on the 11th of January and submissions close on the 11th of February. Normally this committee signs off Council's submission, but there will be no committee meetings over that time frame, so we're simply asking for a delegation to the chair of this committee or the deputy chair of this committee to sign off Council's submission.
Move.
Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to move.
Moved. Seconded. No discussion.
By who?
Put the motion. Moved by Councillor Fletcher, seconded by Councillor Filipina. Put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Against? Whoosh. That was better than the previous one.
I was going to ask for a bit more time. Joke.
Right. Ross. What a great name. What a great name. Welcome. Update on Rawene landslide. Okay. And
Good afternoon.
We're then going to confidential, so this is just a, sorry, later, so this is an update in open session. Ross.
We have a short presentation for you here. What I'll do with this presentation is just take you briefly through the background so that we remind you. Sorry.
The clicker.
Thank you very much. I'll take you briefly through the background so that you get reminded of what's happened at the site and explain where we're going next with this project. So, in October 2017, the car park around the back of the Makoia Ridge shops failed. This was a site that had been infilled in the mid-20th century, and the resulting landslide was quite significant. Auckland Transport immediately went in and fenced off the site and made it safe, but about 30 car parking spaces were lost, and the debris moved a long way down the slope. So as you can see in this aerial photograph of the site, the extent shown there is less than half the full length of the landslide. But the important thing to note there is the proximity of the buildings at the crest. So over Christmas 2017, we got involved and it started putting sheet piles in around the top of the slope to give a temporary stabilisation to keep the buildings safe. And this shows the work ongoing in January. So as you can see, this project's taken a little while to go through. It is a complicated and difficult task to get this sort of work done, so it's not something that we can do in a hurry. The sheet piles have given us temporary stability for the slope. They've made the buildings at the crest safe, and they've helped restore some confidence to the local population. The sheet piles themselves are 12 to 18 metres long, so although you can see the sheet piles in the background of the photograph there sticking out a short distance, they're actually about twice the height of the buildings you can see, so well and truly buried into that slope. So moving through the year, in June, this shows the sheet piles cut off and a capping beam constructed around the top, and the slope starting to be reshaped. We've diverted surface water and we've pumped water out of the slope. The groundwater has been reduced as well, all to give temporary stability to the slope. So this all forms part of the temporary stability of the slope, making it safe for the surrounding buildings, but it doesn't give us a long-term result. Now this is a, hopefully, short time-lapse video showing the work in the second half of the year, reshaping the slope. We've had temporary access constructed, working our way down through the landslide debris, taking it to a safe angle, and building a working platform at the toe. It's been undertaken very successfully. The work so far has been built on time and on budget, and we'll be talking to you later about the next stages. So that was phase one. Phase one is now complete. The next stages are phase 2 and phase 3. Phase 2 outlined in yellow. I'll talk you through the design on the very last slide, so that's coming up at the end. And phase 3 is further down the gully, where we get into an area of old bushland, which will have a different result. And this is a breakdown of where we've got to. So going back to our first slide, you saw the emergency works, the sheep piles going in. That was the first piece of work we did over the Christmas period. That's complete. Phase 1 has been this year. So temporary works to stabilise the slope, to drain the slope and to reshape it. That is now complete. And it also, during that time, we've got through the design and consenting of phase 2, which is the permanent stabilisation of the slope. So it's important to differentiate between the permanent works and the temporary works. So we now have a design complete for that permanent works, and we're ready to start on that early in the new year. That should take us until May 2019 to complete. And finally, there's phase 3, which was the bottom half that you saw in the previous slide. That covers the flatter land at the toe, and the design for that has not yet been commenced. And that will depend very much on liaison with local landowners, because it covers private land as well as public land. And finally, this is a slide to show how the slope ends up looking. I'm not expecting you to read the text on this slide. I'm just going to talk through some of the details. So the pink at the bottom is the existing rock, and the dotted line following that rock is the surface as it was immediately after the landslide. What we're doing with our design here is we've reshaped the slope to create a working platform, and then you can see the vertical line near the bottom of the slope. They are a set of piles that will go in to stabilise the toe of the slope. They're the next thing to be built from January onwards, and then once that's built, we'll be building back up the slope with imported fill to stabilise it. You'll see there's a lower level at the top with flat ground. That's going to be a reinstated car park to replace the car parking spaces that were lost in the original landslide. Behind that's a small retaining wall, and the previous access road that was behind that will be reinstated as well. So we end up with a situation that's quite similar to what was there before the slide. The slope over the top of that will be reinstated with native vegetation. And what's not shown on this is phase 3, which is further down the slope. As I stated before, that will depend a lot on negotiations with the private landowners, so exactly how that will be dealt with. But we anticipate that it will likely be restored to native bush. So that was a very quick summary of progress so far.
Right, councillors, we're going into confidential later on the item. Probably best to hold all questions. Please don't ask any questions about phase 3. Councillor Cook.
One question, thank you. It's obviously very complex. When you say permanent reinstatement, what's the guarantees that this is any more permanent than before?
Through the chair, the difference between the new slope and the old slope is that the new slope has been designed in accordance with modern engineering standards. The old slope was not designed at all. It was tipped.
A dump.
It was a dump, yeah. So there was no design that we're aware of undertaken on that, and the stability would always have been significantly less than we would normally have. So the new slope has the same sort of factor of safety that you would accept if you were putting a building directly on top of it.
Thank you.
I'll move.
Right, moved. Seconded. Right. No further. I'll put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
Chair,
Against?
sorry.
Oh, sorry, I thought you seconded.
Just for the public record, I guess, just to thank Ross and the team for what in the last year or so has been a phenomenally difficult and intense and often dangerous effort for the contractors, especially the business owners, the landowners, everyone involved. It's highly complex, and the emergency works especially were done, things were changing within days. There was plant that got swallowed up by other slips. People were literally risking their lives to try and protect the town centre and protect what was going on, and Ross and the team, like the professional and complicated work and the way it's been actually put out to the public and the business owners and the very upset people all around Birkenhead of what potentially could have happened. is quite a big deal. So thank you on behalf of myself and Chris and the local board and the businesses and residents. I know there was a lot of anger, but actually people were very happy once they understood everything line by line. Yeah, so just wanted that for before we go into confidential.
And I'll let Anne also just speak.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Yes, I have spoken to our chair. Unfortunately, he just couldn't make it at the last minute, so he's asked me to fill in for him. So I do have permission to speak on his behalf. But I'd also like to reiterate what Richard's just said. It's been a very, very difficult time. And we've had the most amazing contractors, I think, and they've done everything they could to move this along. It's not really move it along. Sorry. But we certainly do appreciate the council's direction on this and the way that they've carried out the whole thing.
And you're going to speak in confidential. Yeah. Well, good, and loved that little movie. That was good. That was great. Councillor Darby, you wanted to just say something. A little bit unusual doing this afterwards, but it's cool.
No, look, it's. I'm saying this in open. Ross, I want to acknowledge your incredible work on behalf of the board and the whole council. I've been on site there a few times with you. This is a very testy situation. You've been remarkable, mate. Absolutely remarkable. You are a highly skilled, really talented technical expert in your field. And the first time I went on site and I heard you basically outline the issue, and it was coming at you. Everybody was coming at you thick and fast. How you've handled yourself and represented the council at some very testy meetings has been incredible. And I'm really grateful that you are at the helm of it. And I say that straight and honestly to you. Thank you.
Okay, so we've put the motion, it's passed, so thank you. We've got one more item, which I think we can just take as read, so I'll move that, seconded by Councillor Simpson. This is item 11. We've got that noted. Put the motion, all those in favour? Okay, against, no one presumably. And the procedural motion, it's on the screen. I'll be reading it because you can all read.
Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to move that.
Okay, second by Councillor Collins. All those in favour?
Aye.
Okay, so clear the room, please. Lock the gates. Very good.